I guess I can get started on the reading. Where is my thing? Right here. Oh my goodness. I totally forgot that this was, alright. I'm not sure I'm gonna explain all that. That was all last stream. That is a video that I have made, if you would like to see how we wound up at that point. Alright, chapter 2. Don't look that up. Ken stared at his phone and deleted New Salem disappearances from the search bar. It did little to calm his mind. He had read enough articles about missing persons from around this theater to keep him busy, internet search or not. Take the next exit, blared the GPS on Connor's phone. He was terrible at directions. Without a GPS, he'd get lost on his way to school. They took the turn, the momentum slamming Ken's 10-ton backpack against his legs. Garlic skin crackled on impact, and all its fragrant glory fumed into the car. The drive was simultaneously frighteningly fast and painfully slow. He fumbled through his old messages just to keep busy. His mother still hadn't texted him back, which meant he'd be in big trouble, if he made it back alive. Ken dropped his phone in his lap for the 6th time. Connor watched him, a frown on his face. Ken? You alright, man? Yeah. Hearing the shake in his voice, Ken didn't even believe the lie himself. Yeah, I'm fine. Just looking for spooks. He picked his phone back up and filled in the web browser search bar with New Salem Murders, deleted it. He would regret it if he hit enter. You've been twitchy. I can take you home. Your mom's going to be livid if you stay out too late. Connor wasn't fazed. Apparently, he didn't even think about the possibilities of getting mugged, or eaten, or kidnapped, or a satanic sacrifice. All he cared about was getting close to a girl. With how stubborn Connor was, Ken had his hands full. He looked down at his phone. Again. The pressure built up in Ken's head. He couldn't contain his anxieties anymore. Do you know how many people go missing in New Salem? Connor shot him a look. Are you talking about those stupid blogs you follow? Ken deflated. Of course, that's how Connor would react. Connor didn't believe in half of the stories. How could he be this ignorant? Did he pay zero attention to the world? They're not just blogs. They're news articles, police reports, and actual investigations. No black magic involved. Connor scrunched his face. The expressions meant to inform Ken he was overreacting. You say that a lot, but those articles usually turn out to be a fake. Remember those weird animal killings you said were the work of aliens? And they were wolves that escaped the sanctuary? That's different. He meant it, but Ken's thoughts scattered away from him. They always did when he needed to produce evidence like this. Outside, buildings appeared around them, rising to the sky. The city, where ghouls lurked in the sewers and nightmares stalked the night. No one would question his disappearance there. They happened all the time. These are nasty. Like dead bodies found drained of blood. Like there's a gang here. Or a cult. Connor shook his head. I'm sure we'll be fine. I mean, you heard Cassie. She goes here all the time. You'd think she'd notice something fishy if it really was happening. Damn. Lost him. Shouldn't have mentioned cults. Neon green light reflected around the corner. Ken's heart leaped to his throat when the beaming sign that read New Salem Theater came into view. The place was swamped. A line of eager people stretched the entire length of the block. Further, past the stoplights, hazy smoke fluctuated in the accumulation of lights around, be it the dazzling neon signage or the flitting headlights of passing cars. Every single person in line looked like a freak show, all covered in piercings and tattoos, their jackets geared up in band patches and shoulder spikes. Everything Ken saw screamed dangerous and reckless, and maybe more than poor life choices written all over them. Did Connor really visit these places? Dress up like a freak when Ken wasn't around? Connor turned the car toward the parking tower. Ken swiveled his head around to keep sight of the people. How many eyes watched him back? Oh, come on, Ken continued. There's no way you don't believe in at least a little of the supernatural. Don't you remember all those stories your mom used to tell us? About organizations of modern knights and how they slew monsters and evildoers? We used to eat that stuff up. A slight grin pulled his cheeks as he remembered those stories. Connor's mother always told the best stories. She wasn't like Ken's grandmother, who always told tales with a dark warning. Connor's mom told stories that were whimsical, about heroes and villains, about good beating evil. Maybe Connor thought they were just stories, but Ken didn't think so. Those stories had to come from somewhere. He looked at Connor. Don't you at least hope some of them are real? Connor didn't respond. his gaze focused somewhere distant, on the road ahead. The quiet stretched. Ken realized his mistake. I'm sorry, Connor. I didn't mean to... Damn. He tried not to talk about Connor's mom. Connor shut down every time. It's fine. Connor cut Ken off. Ken swallowed his apologies back up. Some dreadful miasma filled his stomach, polluting his chest and intestines with regret. He should have known better. Connor hadn't talked about his mother's death since it happened nearly a month ago. The topic was a black hole in conversation, and Ken never wanted to pry. He didn't know the details of how Connor's mother died. He didn't know things at home were pretty bad, and Connor had been taking it pretty hard. Since Connor had lost his mom, he acted differently, more reserved, testier. Ken had no idea what Connor was thinking. Ken simultaneously understood Connor's loss, and he didn't. He couldn't imagine life without his mom. Didn't even want to think about it. I'm just trying to forget it all, okay? Connor continued in an aggravated tone. I can barely handle all the stress from school and my dad, my job. God, I used my job as an excuse to get away from home. My mom was my anchor. She made me think I could handle it all. And now that she's gone... Connor trailed off. He didn't sound like he wanted to keep going. Nothing's gone right. Just once, I want to pretend life is all right. Like it's normal again. Ken pursed his lips. He wasn't equipped to handle this kind of situation. What did he say to that? Nothing? Silence drew out between them. Finally, Ken spoke up. Then let's have a normal night. Like nothing ever happened. New Salem disappeared behind them. The parking tower was a ways away. Hardly any spaces made themselves available. Cars packed every spot. Parking spots were guesses. The paint had faded. Cars haphazardly squeezed where they could fit. Some parked crooked on purpose, as if to spare themselves more room to leave. If the venue invited this kind of clientele, he sure hoped it would be quick. Spots finally opened near the third level. Plenty of empty spaces appeared, but Connor blew past them. Only one place would be acceptable. Cassie's car sat in the middle of a couple of empty spaces, right where Connor could sidle right beside hers. Right in the middle of a vulnerable position, free of cover. Ken shook his head. Ridiculous thought. If anything happened to them, it would be in the theater itself. Connor pulled the parking brake, but left the engine on. He looked warily over to Ken. You sure you want to go? Last chance. Determination rushed through Ken. Yes, he said before Connor finished. Then, more calmly, yes, I need to be here. Especially when things go south. Connor was too stubborn to see the warning signs. Ken would be damned if his friend went into without backup. Ken cracked open his backpack, rummaging under the bundle of sage and the silver-cased fountain pen for the rest of his protection charms. He had a silver letter opener until Miss Ivers found it and informed him it was too dangerous to carry around the school. That forced him to order a replacement. If a werewolf attacked during class, she would be the last person he saved. Connor, do me a favor, he said in the middle of stuffing his jacket and pants pockets with various protective objects. He pulled out a string of garlic from his backpack. Keep this on you. Connor's face contorted with disgust. No way. I won't smell like that all night. Ken rolled his eyes. Connor never took him seriously. This is serious. Don't you know the... He stopped himself before he went down to that rabbit hole again. Fine. Take this instead. Ken stuffed a couple cloves into his jacket and produced an ash cross. Really, any religious symbol would do. In certain contexts, or certain regions, a different symbol would work better than others. At least, according to the blog he read. In North America, they reported, the cross had a bit more power against the supernatural. Maybe it was a symbol's popularity? Maybe it was something more mysterious. Just trust me, okay? If not for you, do it for me. Connor stared at him with a furrow on his brow. Slowly but surely, he slacked his shoulders, let his guard down. He took the cross from Ken's hands and put it into his jean pocket. Whatever you say. Let's not keep them waiting. Connor exited the car. Ken waited, taking some time to breathe and collect himself. He dug in his backpack and stuffed a can of spray-on deodorant and a candle lighter into his pocket. If all else failed, that would succeed. Nothing, man or monster, enjoyed being on fire. Satisfied, he followed Connor. As soon as he opened the car door, the faint roar of the theater pulsed through his body, a dull throb in a nearly indistinguishable rhythm. There could have been words as well, difficult to determine what was music and what wasn't. The mellow spring breeze morphed into freezing claws that pierced his skin and bit into his bones. He never liked staying out late. He'd rather be at home, snug in a blanket with some hot chocolate, watching the X-Files. Cassie sat perched on the back bumper of her car. Yana leaned against the side, nose buried in her phone. Her in her freakish makeup and clothes. She could have walked straight out of the Black Lagoon. All dark lipstick and dark eyeliner. She was as intimidating as hell. The ghost must have taken residence in her body. Or maybe she was the ghost. Maybe a zombie? Took you guys long enough, Cassie greeted. Yana's scowl glossed a generous 2 seconds over them before returning to her phone. She sure would make this trip fun. We were behind you the whole time, Connor teased, a playful tone in his voice. His demeanor changed completely from the car. His confidence seemed to have skyrocketed since his heroic save from the football bomb. Connor's newfound confidence was going to make him do something stupid, like follow his crush into the most dangerous place Ken knew of. Who's playing? A metal band called Scare the Daylights. Never heard of them? Aren't they local? The singer came from Colorado, I think. Ken grimaced when he realized what kind of concert he got invited to. A metal concert. They couldn't have brought him to an event that played actual music? The grin on Cassie's face grew wider. Yeah, her name is Umbra Nightshade. They call her Queen Night. Ken wanted to puke. Super creative. The band did what? Pull the first fancy word in the thesaurus for dark? They debuted here, actually, she went on. They come back to play almost every year. Cassie was not the sort that struck Ken as a metal lover. She looked too pure. Too good. Not a weirdo like her friend. Hurry up, growled Yana. She looked up from her phone just long enough to deliver a sneer to Ken. We're going to miss their opening song again. Wind cut across Ken, gouging lines of ice over his skin. Lightning prickled up and down his spine. Same feeling he got when a ghost lurked in his room. All the determination he'd felt while preparing to protect his friend crashed down like a rock through a spider web. He craned his neck, looked around, searching for the eyes he knew watched him. Something huddled in the darkness, away from their vision. Or was it just his imagination? On second thought, he said, I don't have any money. Especially for, an upfront ticket. Scout me for my paycheck. His gaze floated to Connor, who bore a familiar look of disapproval on his face. Cassie, however, laughed that issue off. No, don't worry. You won't have to pay a dime. That phrase was on par with a cue for her to pull a wad of $100 bills from her pocket, or flash her gold and diamond jewelry. She did neither of those things, however, instead keeping her answer a mystery. She led the way out of the parking lot, toward the venue. Can't you just leave your friend in the car? Yana looked at Connor from beneath thick, black eyelashes. Her voice was always low, so she spoke at a hair's breadth of a hiss. He's going to cause a scene. Look at all the stuff in his pockets. All the garlic rubbed against Ken's ribs. It would take ages to wipe the sour smell off his jacket. He's always like that, Connor chuckled. He's really into the paranormal. Thinks there are vampires around here. Ken's face went red. Sold out by his best friend. Yana's gaze tore into him, sharp and hawk-like, as if to see if Connor was joking. You think vampires are killing all the people at New Salem? Her expression tapered into something like a grin. Nice. She brushed past him, leaving Ken with a scent of lavender and confusion over whether she meant that as an insult. Music blasted from the guts of the city. Buildings stood tall and high around them, obscuring the sky. Ken's attention moved to the darkest patches of the city. The alleys, the cars, the windows. Things lurked there, watched. He clutched his silver pen. He had no intention of becoming like one of the bloodless victims the newspapers talked about. Pale as a sheet, with an expression of terror. A crowd populated the end of the curb. A thick smoke of throat-closing tobacco permeated the air, forcing Ken to throw his shirt over his nose. How did anyone stand this kind of environment? Cassie paid the line no mind. She walked right past everyone, garnering the sour stares of every dark-eyed freak there. Ken shrank under their gazes, though he didn't take his eyes off them for a second. They could all be crazy axe murderers for all he knew. "Hey, garlic boy, you put some deodorant in there?" sneered Yana. "I don't want to be around you smelling like that all night." For one moment, Ken broke his transfixed gaze from the line and faced Yana. "Trade your garlic for your phone. Might save your life crossing the street." Yana scoffed and stuffed the phone into her jacket. "I'll trip you if a vampire comes around." Now the noise rattled Ken's eardrums. Rancid sweat, steamed and condensed from inside thick leather jackets, permeated the air. Against the dirty walls were posters of different bands that played the venue. They seemed to be posted in order of rising intensity. It didn't look like they had removed a single poster over the years, but instead added new posters on top. At the end of the line, where bright red lights strobed out of the doorway, an enormous man stood, checking people's tickets. He had a vest that read security on his chest. So much gear lined his uniform he could prevent a fight, or a zombie outbreak. Cassie walked right up to him as if he were a candy salesman. Watching her stand so close to the brute nearly gave Ken a heart attack. "You missed the line, sweetheart," growled the bouncer. Ken's guts twisted. Long, greasy hair, parted into sections like prison bars, ran down the length of the guard's face to his gristly chin. Ken couldn't pin down the bouncer's open-mouthed expression. A mean grin or a sneer. He had the shoulders of a bear wrestling champion and the knuckles of a boulder-smashing ogre. One look from him, and Ken would snap like a twig. "You gonna start a scene if I do?" Cassie's smile was overly sweet, like saccharine. Ken's ribcage hurt from the furious thumps in his heart. Cassie would get squeezed like a tube of toothpaste and be headline news. The man's burly form leaned over Cassie. Ken took several steps back. He had no desire to be part of this confrontation. Hell, he could already feel his neck breaking, and the rest of his bones. Simultaneously, a warm smile cracked across the man's face. At least, as warm as a deranged lunatic could look when he smiled. "Well, if you saw the death stares behind you, it ain't me who'll start trouble." He took a meaty hand and unhooked the rope that blocked the entrance. "The crowd might scare the daylights out of you if it weren't for me." "Thanks, Uncle Logan. You're the best." Cassie exaggerated every word. She swept through the entrance, giving the half-giant a hug as she went. Yana passed Ken next with a patronizing smile. The burly man, Cassie's apparent uncle, cast his wicked gaze over Ken. "For this time, might have to break the owner's arm to let this one slide." He didn't sound like he was kidding. "I know how you like a challenge," said Cassie, urging Ken and Connor to come closer. Connor passed the bouncer, and a hand flew to him, caught by the wrist in an instant. But not like someone stopped a suspicious party. It was a visceral, primal action, like he couldn't control himself. The half-giant's nostrils flared, taking in a deep breath. His eyes dilated, focusing, pinpointing something only a feral creature could detect. Then, in the same instant, he let go. He bobbed his head in approval to Connor. Connor looked bewildered, but he also looked smart enough not to question a man twice his size. He followed Cassie and Yana. Chills darted down Ken's back. Cassie's uncle couldn't be human, not with that speed. And that look he gave Connor? It was unnatural, more akin to a territorial lion. Ken rushed past. The half-giant chuckled. "You smell like garlic, kid." Ken smiled weakly up at him, but he didn't dare make eye contact. Not with this man. He slunk out of the sight, into the belly of the theater, out of the frying pan and into the fire. And to think, only moments ago, he watched his brother's football game. How had his day come to this? They shimmied through the lobby. He could barely think, let alone move, in this crowd. This lobby could barely contain a dozen people, let alone the 50 rubbing shoulders with him. Ken carved his way to his friends, wriggling past the sweaty bodies on his way. Dead ahead of him was a counter space where several shirts and posters displayed various Scare the Daylights album covers. Stuff like a woman holding an overflowing chalice of blood or a giant bat terrorizing a city street. Real charming stuff. Directly left of the counter was a bar where people ordered drinks in see-through plastic cups. It reminded Ken how dry his throat was. A water bottle had to be added to his prep list. Beside the bar was the bathroom hall. Ken took special note of that. His stomach already threatened to flip. "This place is packed," he heard Cassie say at the edge of his hearing. "Wonder what the occasion is." He should have brought less stuff. Every instrument poked against his guts, rib or leg, no matter where he moved. "They're releasing a new album," said Yana, announcing her expertise from her phone. "They're debuting it here, where it all started." Lights flashed from beyond a second set of doors, lights from where everything appeared dark, and the biggest group of people hovered. A mass that moved slowly together, consuming whatever space lay beyond those doors. That must be the auditorium, the loudest place in the building. The noise he heard as dull throbs cleared up the instant he walked in. Grating, ear-splitting. The treble reached into his head and scraped his eardrums, 20 times louder than the noise had any right to be. Heat erased all semblance of the chilly night. The ungodly smells of the concert-goers concentrated in this box Ken now stood in. Ken did forget one thing. A stress ball. Maybe two, for what was coming. He grabbed a chunk of garlic and instead played with that as he came up beside Connor. Of course, Connor didn't notice, his head close to Cassie's as he shouted over the music. Why did people go to these? How did noise and sweaty people make music a better experience? The auditorium must have made up the entire building's real estate. One vast, flat floor stretched before him. A grain of sand couldn't squeeze through the dense audience. Speakers pointed down at them from a stage, blasting what sounded like stock metal music. Ken noticed a set of stairs that led to a second level. It looked more comfortable there than it was below. Of course, Connor and the others blew right past the stairs into the pit. Did people seriously stand through these entire concerts? "You come here a lot?" Connor asked, barely audible over the drums. Ken had to strain to hear him. "All the time," said Cassie, seemingly at the top of her lungs. "Free tickets. It's how we first saw Scare the Daylights." Then, the so-called music stopped. The lights cut. Conversations dulled to a hush. Anticipation roiled among the crowd's shoulders. A loud rumble, a single note, thundered from under the floor. Light split the darkness from above. Fog laced the stage like curled fingers, obscuring all but the silhouette of a drum set. Yana put down her phone. "Finally," she said. "Come on, let's go." She pushed past the people in front of her. Cassie followed, and so did Connor. Ken wanted to shout, to make everyone stop, but his voice didn't work. His heart tumbled over his stomach. All he did was latch to Connor's shoulder and plunge into the crowd. A figure appeared on the stage. They approached the drum set, arms spread apart. A spotlight shone down on them. Mad applause spilled from the crowd. Yana pointed a black-polished nail. "Alex Mora. He's from Brazil. Fastest drummer alive." Alex was long, willowy, unnaturally tall. His black vest shivered with every step. A tacky spiked belt wrapped around his waist like a traffic strip. Alex struck the drums. 1, 2, 3. Fast as a machine gun. Ken recoiled. His eardrums rattled. He clutched Connor's jacket tighter, fearful of losing him. They kept going. They kept going, and he wanted to stop, to get away from this madness. 2 more figures wandered out of the fog, eliciting another round of cheers. "Ulrich and Samson," Yana said in the breath after. At least, Ken thought he heard that. One stood in a duster coat and wore a wide-brimmed hat. The other wore a leather jacket, with nothing but his pasty chest underneath. Local legends. Played for 8 bands. Her voice vanished under a blast of bass. A blend of notes. Garbled nonsense. The excitement dwarfed the earlier football game. Ken's lungs trembled with the power of the applause. His heartbeat heightened, but it was nothing compared to what was coming next. "Welcome back, Colorado." A smoky voice washed over the auditorium. The spotlights sheared to one point. A woman melted out of the darkness. Her lips were the color of rich blood, her hair the color of a lightless abyss. She approached the mic stand, moving not with normal human movements, but with the careful calculation of a predator. Her lips spread into something of a smile, revealing canines twice the length of a normal person's. Her head tilted up, just enough to see her eyes, and they sparkled red. Every person in the auditorium lost their minds. Their cheers bludgeoned the air. Ken's skull vibrated to the point he thought blood would start running down his nose. He shut up his ears with his fingers. He blocked out the intrusive thoughts screaming, "Vampire, vampire, vampire." There were no such things as vampires. But what was he looking at here? "Such a warm welcome from our faithful ghouls to be," went on the forewoman. Ken covered his ears again from the following bellow resonating throughout the entire theater. "I expect nothing less from a city trapped under our spell." That line sent chills down Ken's spine. He realized how little space was around him. Everyone was too close, a tomb made up of people. It got hard to breathe. The bass thrummed with additional notes, vibrating the air. The forewoman parted her lips and took a deep breath. Everyone in the auditorium breathed in with her. "Do you smell that? That's the smell of new blood." Her gaze latched onto Ken, as if she'd known he was there the entire time. "Our flock grows." Her gaze pinned Ken. He was prey. Livestock. He clutched his garlic, fumbling with its crispy skin and smooth inner layer, kept himself busy, pretended he wasn't in a sea of leather-clad lunatics. "Why don't we start off the night fresh? Show our new ghouls to be a taste of what's to come." Yana shook Cassie's shoulder. Ken only saw her mouth the words, "Their new album." The guitar erupted, splitting the air with noise. Strobes flickered against the entire theater. The guitarist's fingers ripped into the strings at speeds impossible to register, impossible for a human to accomplish. The drummer turned into a blur, supernaturally fast. Ken shrunk into the crowd. How could he explain away this theater? All he saw were answers. It all made sense. The killings, the state the bodies were in, everything. Ken's breaths grew short. His heart threatened to burst. Panic. He needed air and he couldn't get it. He staggered back. Lights melted together, and so did the wretched cacophony between the guitar and the crowd. Maybe the singer was singing. Maybe she wasn't. He couldn't tell anymore. Ken thrust out his sticky, garlicky hand and barreled out the crowd. People leaped out of his way, created a path, fresh and open, for him to follow. "Ken!" Someone shouted his name. The word little more than a whisper over the conglomerate of noise. The room tilted to one side. Barbed wire wrapped inside his chest. His veins went cold, bloodless. Was this a heart attack? His stomach squeezed up its contents. He crashed through the bathroom doors and vomited. And there is chapter 2.